Please subscribe and share for more story. People often say betrayal hurts most when it comes from family, but Marianne Holt, 68, never understood that saying until it happened to her. On a quiet Tuesday morning, 2 days before Thanksgiving, she stood on the back porch of her pale blue house outside Savannah, watching the marsh tide pull away from the reeds. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. She held a warm mug of coffee in one hand and folded an old linen tablecloth with the other, the kind her mother used to iron on Sundays. It had frayed edges and soft embroidery, worn thin by decades of careful use. For a moment, life felt gentle. Then her phone rang. The piece split cleanly. "Hey, Mom," her son Daniel said, his voice bright in a way that felt wrong. He was 42 now, married, busy, always rushing. "So, Paige had an idea. You're going to love it." Marianne closed her eyes briefly. Paige, Daniel's wife of 8 years, didn't wait long. Her voice slid in sharp and smooth. "Tell her, Dan." He hesitated. Marianne noticed. She always did. "Well," Daniel continued, "Paige's family is coming down for Thanksgiving. About 30 people." Marianne's fingers tightened around the tablecloth. 30. Paige took over the call like a conductor lifting her baton. "We'll need 2 turkeys, traditional sides, desserts, the whole spread," she said briskly. "And the table needs to look good. This isn't just dinner. It's a presentation." Marianne leaned against the porch rail. No one had asked yet. They were already assigning. "And, of course," Paige added lightly, "you'll stay behind the scenes like always. No pressure. Just food, setup, cleanup. Once guests arrive, try not to hover. Let it feel like our event." Daniel laughed softly, like this was normal. Marianne stared at the marsh. The birds had gone quiet. Something settled in her chest, heavy and cold. "So, is that okay, Mom?" Daniel asked. Before she could answer, Paige's voice softened, almost sweet. "We're just grateful we can count on you. You've always been good at this. You make things feel taken care of. Vintage. Homey. Vintage." Marianne remembered her late husband once calling her steel wrapped in lace. Paige seemed to see her as wallpaper. "I'll think about it," Marianne said. "Great," Paige replied quickly. "I'll send the schedule." The call ended before Marianne could breathe. The email arrived minutes later. Subject line: Thanksgiving Execution Plan, hosted by Paige and Daniel Cross. Marianne scrolled slowly. Prep times. Guest flow. Cleanup rotation. At the bottom, a line made her stomach turn. Kitchen support. Marianne H. Not host. Not family. Support. She set the phone down and went inside. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses instead of comforts. As she passed the staircase shelf, she stopped. The velvet box that once held her husband Thomas's Navy service watch was gone. Not moved. Gone. A clean ring of dust marked its absence. Marianne checked drawers, closets, even the hall cabinet where she stored extra candles. Nothing. Her heart didn't race. It sank. Thomas's watch wasn't jewelry. It was memory. Years at sea. Missed birthdays. A life built slowly. She had kept it safe for 15 years. Her phone buzzed again. Another email, forwarded by Paige to someone named Isabel. "She insisted we use her house," Paige wrote. "It'll look like it's already ours soon anyway. She's easy to manage. Just make her feel useful." Marianne sat down. Something inside her stood up. She opened her laptop with steady hands. Inside a folder labeled Personal sat her will, written 3 years earlier, back when she still believed good intentions mattered. Daniel was listed as the sole inheritor of the house. Marianne stared at the document longer than she expected. Then she searched local pawn listings. The second result showed a blurry photo under glass. Gold face. Black band. Engraved initials, TH. Price, $480. Marianne covered her mouth, not to cry, but to stay quiet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Just checking you've got everything handled. Let me know if you need grocery money." Handled. She didn't reply. Instead, she emailed her lawyer. Subject: immediate amendment request. Then she contacted a travel agent. By sunset, the plan was forming, not loud, not angry.
Clear.
Marianne stood in the hallway again, staring at the empty shelf. Not this time, she said aloud. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't going to argue. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to disappear, just long enough for the truth to speak for itself. By morning, Marianne moved with purpose. She changed bank accounts, updated locks, and packed 3 suitcases. Not everything, just enough. In the kitchen, she wrote a note and slid it under a smooth stone on the island. Gone to the mountains for the holiday. The house is all yours. Then she cleared the pantry. Every can, every spice, every box went into storage. She unplugged the garage fridge. The dining plates, crystal, and serving dishes followed. Nothing broken. Nothing stolen. Just removed. At noon, she sent one calm email to Paige's relatives. Attachments included the pawn listing, Paige's messages, and the notarized will amendment. I thought you deserved clarity before traveling. At 3:20 p.m., a taxi pulled up. Marianne took one last look at the house she had kept standing for nearly 4 decades. This is mine, she said softly. Then she closed the door and left, quietly, completely, and on her own terms. The mountain resort felt unreal at first, like Marianne had stepped into someone else's life by accident. She arrived just before dusk, the sky washed gold and violet over the Blue Ridge peaks. She dropped her bags inside the suite and went straight to the balcony. The air was sharp and clean. No salt. No marsh. No memories waiting to accuse her. She stood there longer than necessary, not because the view was beautiful, though it was, but because once she sat down, the next phase would begin. And once that started, there would be no turning back. Her phone buzzed. A message from Arthur Hale, Paige's uncle. Thank you for the information. This is unexpected. May we speak before Thursday? Marianne read it twice. She didn't answer yet. She wanted him to sit with the discomfort. She poured herself tea and, finally, sat on the edge of the bed. The house was secured. The pantry was empty. The illusion was already cracking. This isn't revenge, she said quietly to herself. It's correction. Outside, the mountains darkened, steady and unmoved. Marianne slept better that night than she had in years. The next morning, Marianne drove back into town, not home, never home. She stopped at an office supply store and printed hard copies of every document. Emails, screenshots, the pawn receipt, the amended will. Paper felt heavier than digital. It carried consequence. On the way back to the resort, she made one more call. Pawn and trade, a man answered. My name is Marianne Holt, she said calmly. I'm calling about a Navy service watch pawned last week. There was a pause. Gold face, black band? Yes. I remember it. Brought in by a woman. Nervous. Rushed. That watch belonged to my husband. Another pause. Softer now. It's still here. I'll pay today. By sunset, Marianne was back on the balcony watching the mountains turn purple. She felt no triumph yet, just alignment. Her phone buzzed again. This time from Isabel. So this is why Paige dodges questions, the message read. Good to know. I'm bringing documents. Marianne smiled faintly. The truth was moving faster now. She hadn't pushed it. She had simply stepped aside. Thanksgiving morning arrived quietly. Marianne woke before sunrise and sat in bed, hands folded, listening to the wind in the trees. Somewhere hours away, chaos was beginning. At 9:07 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Where are you? The kitchen's empty. She didn't answer. 3 minutes later. Did you forget it was today? Then, Mom, this isn't funny. Paige is panicking. Marianne sipped her tea. She imagined Paige opening the fridge, then the pantry, then the cabinets. Imagine the realization spreading like cold water. At 9:42, Paige texted. I don't understand what game you're playing. Then another. People are arriving at noon. This is humiliating. Then pleading. Please just tell me where the food or dishes are. I'll fix it. Marianne turned the phone face down. Silence had become her strongest voice. At 10:15 a.m., an unfamiliar number left a voicemail. Hi, Marianne, Isabel said. I just arrived. Something's very wrong. There's no food. No setup. Paige says you left. Are you okay? Marianne replayed the message once. That was enough. At 10:47, Daniel texted again. Where are the plates? The tablecloth? Please. Then nothing. At 11:18, Arthur messaged. Can I call you? Marianne waited 3 minutes, then called him herself. Marianne, Arthur said, voice tight. What happened? I planned a vacation, she replied evenly. My kitchen is not a factory. My home is not a stage. And I am not staff. He exhaled. I received your documents. Then you understand this house isn't theirs. Yes. If Paige told you I agreed to host, Marianne added, she lied. Arthur was quiet for a moment. Thank you for clarifying. Marianne ended the call and looked out at the trees. The lie was collapsing without her lifting a finger. At 11:55 a.m., photos arrived from Isabel. The bare front porch. The dining table still pushed against the wall. Paige standing in the kitchen, arms out, face pale, surrounded by nothing. Marianne saved them. Not for satisfaction. For record. At noon exactly, she turned her phone back on. 16 missed calls. She FaceTimed Arthur. He answered quickly. Behind him, her living room, hers, buzzed with confusion. Guests whispered. Coats were still on. No warmth. No welcome. How are things? Marianne asked. Arthur looked tired. Unclear. Isabel stepped into view. Did you leave intentionally? Yes. Did you agree to host? No. Arthur nodded slowly. We've been misled. Then Paige appeared, forcing a smile. Marianne, thank God. This is a misunderstanding. You lied, Marianne said calmly. Paige froze. You used my home, my name, my husband's legacy, and you never asked. The room went still. Truth had entered. Isabel turned toward Paige, tablet in hand. You told me you had this under control. I did, Paige snapped. You staged it, Isabel corrected, and failed. Arthur cleared his throat. We'll be leaving, Marianne. He didn't look at Paige. Neither did the others. One by one, coats were pulled on. Conversations ended. Daniel stepped forward, eyes hollow. Mom, I planned a vacation, Marianne said. I didn't disappear. I stopped performing. Paige tried again. We can still order food. You can't fix deception with delivery apps, Isabel said sharply. That ended it. Marianne watched silently as the house emptied. She ended the call and placed the phone face down. The reckoning wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was clean. Back at the house, the doorbell rang around 3. Daniel opened it. A man stood there holding a plastic bag and an envelope. You must be Marianne Holt's son, the man said. Yes. I'm returning something. Paid in full. Inside the bag was the velvet box. Daniel opened it. His father's watch rested inside. The envelope held the pawn receipt, Paige's signature, her ID, and a note in Marianne's handwriting. You sold history. I brought it home. Daniel looked at Paige. When? She whispered. I needed cash. You sold what wasn't yours, he said quietly. The house fell silent. Miles away, Marianne finished her dinner in peace. The mountain sky darkened. She held her tea and smiled, not in victory, but in relief. The invisible woman had walked away and taken the truth with her. After the pawn shop man left, Daniel sat alone on the edge of the sofa, the velvet box resting in his hands like something fragile and alive. He didn't open it again. He didn't need to. The weight of it was enough. Across the room, Paige stood near the kitchen island, arms wrapped around herself, eyes darting as if searching for a script that had vanished. I was going to buy it back, she said finally. Daniel didn't look up. You didn't think. I was under pressure, she insisted. Your business. Don't, he said softly. That scared her more than shouting would have. You sold my father's service watch. You used my mother like hired help. You lied to everyone. Paige's voice cracked. I was trying to keep things together. No, Daniel replied. You were trying to control how things looked. The house felt different now. Not empty, exposed. The absence of guests had stripped the walls bare of illusion. For the first time, Daniel saw what his mother must have felt for years, the slow erasure disguised as convenience. He rubbed his face and whispered, I didn't protect her. Paige said nothing. There was nothing left to say. That evening, Paige paced the kitchen in tight circles, heels clicking against the floor that held no crumbs, no spills, no warmth. We can still salvage this, she said, voice thin. We'll host a makeup dinner. Apologize. People forget. Daniel stared at the blank dining room. They didn't forget today. She turned sharply. You're choosing her over me? He finally looked at her. I'm choosing reality. Paige scoffed. She embarrassed us. She exposed us, Daniel corrected. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the living room. The chairs were still stacked in the corner. The tablecloth remained sealed in plastic. Everything Paige had planned for display now looked like evidence. I need air, she muttered, grabbing her coat. Daniel didn't stop her. He sat back and listened to the door close. For the first time in years, the house felt honest. Uncomfortable, but honest. He picked up his phone and scrolled to his mother's name. His thumb hovered. Then he put the phone down. Some apologies needed time to mean anything. In the mountains, Marianne woke the next morning to snowfall. Soft, steady, unbothered. She watched it from the balcony, with a blanket around her shoulders. Her phone remained quiet. That was intentional. She wasn't hiding. She was letting the truth settle where it belonged. Later that morning, Arthur called again. I wanted you to know, he said, the family understands now. Paige misrepresented a great deal. Marianne nodded, though he couldn't see it. Thank you for saying that. I also wanted to apologize, he added, for assuming. Marianne allowed herself a small breath. Apologies matter when they come with change. Arthur agreed. They will. After the call, Marianne packed her things slowly. She would return soon, not to reclaim space, but to redefine it. The house would feel different now. So would she. She no longer felt tired. She felt finished with being overlooked. Daniel called that afternoon. Marianne let it ring once before answering. Mom, he said quietly. I'm listening, she replied. I didn't see it, he admitted. What she was doing. What I was allowing. Marianne sat on the bed, hands folded. Seeing comes late sometimes. I'm sorry, he said. For the watch. For the emails. For treating you like help. Marianne closed her eyes. I didn't raise you to disappear people. I know, he whispered. There was no shouting. No tears. Just truth moving carefully between them. I've changed the will, Marianne said. Daniel swallowed. I understand. When the call ended, Marianne didn't feel victorious. She felt aligned. She had corrected the story, not rewritten it in anger, but in clarity. When Marianne returned home days later, the house greeted her quietly. No tension. No performance. Just walls and light and memory. She placed Thomas's watch back on the shelf, the velvet box steady beneath her fingers. You're home, she said softly. She moved through each room, opening windows, letting fresh air replace what had lingered too long. The kitchen no longer felt like a workplace. It felt like hers again. She brewed coffee and sat at the table alone. Not lonely, complete. Outside, the marsh moved as it always had. Patient. Enduring. Marianne understood something then. Dignity didn't come from being needed. It came from being respected, or from walking away when respect disappeared. She had done both. Thanksgiving passed into memory, but the lesson stayed. Paige didn't return. Daniel visited weeks later, quieter, humbler. He brought no demands, only himself. Marianne welcomed him, not as penance, but as possibility. The house no longer hosted performances. It held truth. And that was enough. In the weeks that followed, the story traveled faster than Marianne ever expected. Not as gossip, but as quiet truth. Arthur spoke to relatives. Isabel shared documents with care. The version page had carefully polished for years cracked and then dissolved. No one attacked her publicly. No one needed to. The facts stood on their own. Marianne felt the change in small ways. Fewer tense calls. More respectful messages. When people spoke to her now, they listened. One afternoon, she sat at the dining table reviewing the trust documents again. The house, once a bargaining chip in someone else's fantasy, now had a future rooted in purpose. After her lifetime, it would become a transitional home for women veterans with nowhere to go. Women who understood silence, sacrifice, and being overlooked. Marianne traced the edge of the paper and smiled. "This feels right," she said aloud. For the first time in years, she wasn't preparing for someone else's comfort. She was building meaning. Daniel began visiting on Sundays. No schedule. No expectations. Just conversation. He fixed small things around the house without being asked. Replaced a hinge. Cleaned the gutters. Listened more than he spoke. One afternoon, he stood by the shelf and looked at his father's watch. "I should have protected this," he said. Marianne nodded. "But now you know how." They talked about Thomas. About missed birthdays. About how easy it was to mistake silence for agreement. "I thought you were okay," Daniel admitted. "I wasn't," Marianne replied gently. "But I was quiet." That truth stayed with him. He never asked about the will again. Paige tried to call once. Marianne let it go to voicemail. The message was polished, careful, apologetic without accountability. Marianne deleted it. Forgiveness, she had learned, did not require access. Instead, she spent her days reclaiming small joys. Morning walks by the marsh. Evening reading by the window. Hosting neighbors for tea, people who thanked her and meant it. The house breathed easier now.
So did she.
In early spring, Marianne received her first letter from a veterans outreach group. They had heard about the trust, about the house, about her decision. "We'd like to meet you," the letter said. She agreed. When the women arrived weeks later, Marianne welcomed them into her living room, not as staff, not as background, but as host in her own right. They spoke about loss, service, and rebuilding. Marianne listened, eyes bright. "This house will hold stories," she told them, "not silence." They understood. On a quiet afternoon, Marianne found the old linen tablecloth folded neatly in a drawer. The frayed edges no longer felt sad. They felt lived in, earned. She laid it across the table and set 2 cups of coffee. Not for show. For presence. She realized then that she no longer needed holidays to feel whole. Wholeness had arrived the day she chose herself. The marsh outside shimmered in the afternoon sun. Marianne lifted her cup in a silent toast, to endings done right. That summer, Daniel stood on the porch one evening and said, "I'm different now." Marianne studied him. "I can see that." He nodded. "I wish it hadn't cost so much." "It cost exactly what it needed to," she replied. They stood together in the fading light. No roles to perform, no debt to repay in words. Just honesty. Marianne Holt lived the rest of her days, without being invisible again. Not because others finally noticed, but because she stopped shrinking. Her home became a place of refuge. Her silence became choice, not obligation. And when Thanksgiving came around the next year, Marianne cooked only for those who honored her seat at the table. That was the difference. On the second Thanksgiving after everything changed, Marianne woke early and opened every window in the house. Cool air moved through the rooms, carrying the familiar scent of marsh grass and salt. She cooked slowly, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. A small turkey, fresh bread, 1 pie cooling on the counter. There was no guest list taped to the wall, no schedule, no performance to maintain. When neighbors arrived, they brought stories instead of expectations. Laughter filled the kitchen, light and unforced. Marianne sat at the table and ate with them, her place claimed, her voice heard. At one point, she caught sight of Thomas's watch resting safely on the shelf, the velvet box closed but present. She touched it briefly as she passed. Not in grief. In gratitude. The house felt full, not with people, but with balance. She understood then that peace wasn't something handed back after betrayal. It was something built deliberately, moment by moment, when a woman finally decided she was done being quietly consumed. Years later, when people asked Marianne how she found the strength to walk away, she never spoke about anger. She spoke about clarity, about the day she realized love without respect was just another form of disappearance. She taught others, especially the women who later passed through her home, that dignity was not loud, but it was immovable. That silence could be powerful when chosen, and devastating when forced. Marianne lived long, lived well, and lived seen. And when her story was told, it was no longer about betrayal or loss. It was about a woman who noticed the moment she was being erased and calmly stepped out of the frame, taking her life, her name, and her worth with her. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than you know, and it lets me keep sharing the lessons life has carved into